So we're gonna cut a little copper here and swag it, put a flare nut on it, and get it ready for some brazing. The first thing we have to do is remember that when we cut copper, if we cut it too fast, we're gonna create like not only a burr, but we're gonna reduce the diameter of the copper. So if we're cutting something like, say, this 3/4 inch copper, I can decide right now that I want to cut it really, really fast, and I can crank down on this tool and cut it, but I'm going to severely reduce the inside. So what I should do is go around a little slower, get it to track. Once it starts tracking, once I know I've got a continuous cut, then I'm just giving it a little twist as I go. This is something we do all the time, but the copper tubing, believe it or not, is not quite as high quality. It splits a lot, and it's not very round. The copper used to come on these really big rolls. And big rolls, I mean big radiuses. And when we unrolled them, they stayed fairly round. The copper now is wrapped on a much tighter roll. And when we unroll it, it's got a little egg shaping going on. That egg shape causes us some trouble because sometimes we can't get fittings to fit in it and things like that. Now, in this school, as a joke, one time I bought this swagging tool, and I just left it here because we have one that costs $200 or $300. But I bought one. I said, hey, I bought some new tools, and this was like $20, and I left it here. It actually has become the favorite tool, and I own quite a few of them now because it has so many purposes. So with the copper, we'll be messing with it. We'll be cutting it. It'll fall. It'll hit the floor. It'll get dented. We'll get a dent in it. It won't fit. Well, with the tool like this, we can put it back inside of it, and we can just kind of real quickly get it to shape back round again so that we can fit fittings on it and fit it into 90s and so forth. But it'll expand the copper and allow us to join two pieces of copper without a coupling. And that's the important part, right? We want to make one braze. If we use a coupling, we have to make two braces. So we swage it open. Now, with this size copper, it's a little more of a task. It's a little harder. The copper, it takes a while. We can do it. I mean, I can sit here and probably get this one to open up enough. Takes more hand power. We just keep going around on it. It's getting each time I squeeze it, it gets a little wider. It also warms the copper up just a little bit, and that makes it a little easier to work. But I just keep going. I'm just going to go until every now and then I'll take a look at it and see. I'm creating that bell, kind of that bell shape, which is the socket, more or less. And the fact that this tool only costs, $20, if I don't make a lot of these type of fittings, then I'm okay with that. So I got that one to work. So they slide together. The nice thing about making a fitting like this is if this is facing me out of the wall like that, and I put a coupling on it, that means I have to make a backwards braze. If it's sticking up out of a compressor and I put a coupling on it, that means I have to make it upside down and one on top. If I choose this method, I can decide where I open it up so that it's easy this way, or it's coming out of the wall, it's facing me this way. So I have a lot more options. Not only that, but I have only one braze to make. So I have half the chance of having a leak. With the 3/8, with the smaller copper, this is a 3/8, I can use any of the cutters. I can use a smaller cutter. This is a close quarters cutter, so if I've got other copper tubing in my way, I can use something small like this. Same thing, just going around it slower. It's a little slower because it's a smaller tool, but I'll go around and do the same thing with it. The 3/8 doesn't egg shape very much, so it tends to work pretty good. What does happen, though, is we pretty much always, just the method of cutting itself tends to crimp the copper in a little bit. And I'll show you another good use for that tool. Okay, we're almost through. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. When you drop it and you bend it, it's not a big deal if you have something that can easily go in there and round it back out. And I can do this and I can make it round again. No matter how flat it gets, I can always fix it. If I want to open one of these up, I can use the same tool and I can start going around it until I get it big enough to insert it in the other end. If I try to rush it, it'll definitely split. The copper is not quite as malleable as it used to be, but I can do it. I can play with it and get it to go. It's fairly easy with 3/8 copper. And I'm just working my way around. I keep looking at it. I don't want to make it too big, just big enough. And then I can give it a little trial here and see if I got it. Okay, so I got those two fit together. Now, if I'm doing one of the bigger pieces and I've got the funds to afford a more expensive tool, I can use this one to kind of deburr it. Remember, I told you that when we cut the copper, we always leave a burr. If I want to deburr it and I use a tool like this reamer tool and I stick it in here, it will do it, but it also is going to put all these shavings in the copper. I'm really cautious about ever using a deburring tool. In the old days, when we wanted to expand a piece of copper, we had to use a swag tool like this that we had to beat with a hammer. It was extremely difficult to do. Much better today. But I can use a hydraulic tool like this. And this one here, when you pump it up, it actually uses hydraulics, and it'll open it up as well. Actually, this one's not even working. So we're not going to use it. We're going to have to go back to manual. When they work, they're nice, but as with any tool, when they break, you always are going back. I don't care if it's electronic gauges. I don't care what it is. You always fall back to your hand manual tools. We're going to open this up because I'm going to be doing some brazing here in a bit. And I want to have a couple more of these to do. So again, tools, old reliable tools that are able to not fail on you is always a good way to go. All right. So the swagging, the cutting, no big deal. The unrolling is no big deal. When you get to big copper, you'll want to put it on the ground and hold your foot on it, and you'll want to unroll it that way because otherwise it's just going to be all curly and not straight. The next thing that I might want to do to a piece of 3/8, like when we're talking about mini splits and such, we have to put a flare nut. We have to flare these. So the first thing you're going to do if you're going to flare is you're going to put the nut on first. You can't put it on afterwards. So you got to get it on there first. If you're going to try to ream that out, remember those shavings are going to fall inside. So if I feel like I need to take that burr off, I'm just going to use a tool like this and just kind of flatten that burr out. I'm really going to be cautious about any kind of reaming. These cutters all have the tool built in, and you can put it on there and use it. But again, shavings are going to go into copper. So I'm very cautious with that. This tool has kind of eliminated the need to do that. I can just take that little burr and I can just flatten it out. Once I get it like this, I'm ready to flare it. Flare tools are not expensive. You just got to pick the right hole. This is 3/8 copper, so it's going to go in the 3/8 hole. And it's going to stick above the flare block just a little bit, maybe the width of a dime. Some of these tools have a little gauge, a little depth gauge. And then we'll get the tool back on it. We'll get it clamped down. All right, once I got it kind of snug, all I got to do now is just crank this in, and it's going to make the flare. It'll click out when I get there, so I don't have to wonder how tight to go. You'll hear it in a minute. There it goes. It just kind of clutches out. So you'll hear it again. See, it won't let me go tighter. That's as far as it'll let me go. I can undo it, take it back off. All right, let's get this guy off of here. See what kind of flare we made. Occasionally, a flare will split on you too. So this one came out really good. And the way you can tell is when you put it back up in the flare nut, it should seat down in there really nice. If you have a plug or a flare fitting you're going to put on it and you put them together, they should really be a good mesh. Now, where people get into problems with the flare fitting is they try to put pipe dope or Teflon tape or some other thing on there. It absolutely does nothing but make it worse. The fitting here, it's a compressed fitting. These two, when they fit together, if I could hold that together tight enough, that's all the nut does. When I put the nut on it and I tighten it up, all I'm really doing is pulling those pieces together. So Teflon tape, pipe dope, no good. If anything, a slight little drop of oil will be helpful, but that's it. The final thing that we can do is the bending. If you want to bend the copper, now we can bend 3/8 with our hands. You know, we can't bend the 3/4 with our hands. We can make a bend with 3/8. If we're gentle and we hold it, we can kind of get a 90-degree bend, and that's not too bad. It doesn't kink. If I need a little sharper bend, I'm going to go to a tool like this. And these are also very inexpensive. And once I get it locked in, I'm looking at the marks. I want it 90 degrees. I just run it down till I hit the 90-degree mark. Then I take the tool off. And what I end up with is just a much sharper, cleaner looking bend with less of a radius. So that's the method on the cutting and the flaring and the swag.